Boundaries are intended to make life better. So why is it that sometimes they only seem to make things worse? Everyone seems to be talking about boundaries these days. Set your boundaries. Reinforce your boundaries. Protect yourself from toxic people. And maybe you've tried that. Maybe you've drawn the line. Maybe you've held it. I think it's because most of us were never really taught what boundaries are meant to be. Our culture tends to use them as weapons, as walls, as ways of dictating who gets close and who doesn't. Maybe even as a way of dictating other people's behaviors. What if we've been focused on the wrong side of the wall? What if boundaries were never meant to be about keeping other people out, but about what you're tending to on the inside? That is what we're building today. Welcome to Piece by Piece. I'm Brian, and this channel is all about rebuilding when life falls apart. Each episode, I work on a puzzle, and we talk about one aspect of rebuilding. This week's puzzle is The Walled Garden by Lorraine Pemberton. But before we start building anything, we need to find the edges, the boundaries. When most people work on a puzzle, they do the edges first. Not because they're the most important, but because they define the space. They tell you this is where the puzzle lives, that everything within this frame is your responsibility. Without the edges, you've got hundreds of pieces, but no sense of where anything actually belongs. Let me tell you what a boundary actually is. Not some therapeutic definition, just what it looks like in real life. When I was young, I threw away yearbooks, my old photos, old videos from high school, my entire documented history, all for a girl. I told myself that it was a fresh start. These things didn't matter compared to what we could build together. What I didn't understand then was that I wasn't just throwing away old paper and photographs. I was practicing something. I was rehearsing the habit of erasing myself when the other people around me were uncomfortable with who I was. If I were forced into that same moment today, I would do things differently. I would hold a boundary. A quiet, clear line that said my history is actually a part of me. My past, my people, my mistakes, my former self. These aren't liabilities to manage for someone else's comfort. They belong to me. And no one gets to uproot them. I get to tend them. I get to let them become part of something that I'm growing. And that's what a boundary really is. Not a wall, not a weapon. Just the edge of something that's mine to tend. Which brings us to today's puzzle. A stone wall, an iron gate, and a garden inside. I mean, just look at what's inside. Things are growing. Someone's in there tending to it. There's life happening within those walls. And that's what we're really after today. I want to break down what these three symbols could represent: the wall, the gate, and the gardener. Let's start by talking about the garden wall. Now, let's be fair. A garden wall does keep things out. Pests, predators, things that would damage what's growing inside. That's real and sometimes necessary. But it's also where I think we've gotten off track. Not everything outside of the wall is a danger. Not every difficult person in your life is an immediate threat that requires complete lockdown. Sometimes you just have a boss that micromanages, or a parent who never quite figured out how to apologize properly, or a friend who somehow makes everything about themselves. Those people are real, and they're frustrating. But the answer is not to keep raising your wall higher and higher until no one else can get close. Esther Perel, a relational therapist, has pointed out that our modern obsession with self-protection has actually hollowed out our capacity for genuine connection. We spend so much energy on keeping everything else out that we forget what the wall was for in the first place. And honestly, that's a losing battle anyway. A garden wall can't stop the weather. It's not gonna keep the rain out. You can't stop your neighbor from throwing his garbage over the fence. And if a pest really wants to get to those vegetables, it's gonna find a way in. Thinking that a wall can actually keep all of the bad out is exhausting, and it's isolating. And it doesn't even really work, because the wall was never really the point. The wall exists for one reason. It's so that something worth tending to can actually grow inside. The point is that you can never really guarantee that nothing difficult will ever come over your wall. What you can do is decide what you're planting, what you're watering, what you're choosing to grow. That's what edges are really for. Next up is the gate. If the wall were the whole story, this would just be a talk about isolation, about cutting yourself off from the rest of the world, about protecting yourself at all costs. But there is a gate, which means that this boundary was never meant to be a fortress. A gate represents access. Access to your time, access to your interior life, access to you. Now, there is some nuance that's worth pausing on for a moment, and that's that access isn't binary. The gate doesn't have to be wide open or slammed shut. You can choose to close the gate without exiling someone. You can close the gate part way. You can say, "Not now," instead of "not ever." The gate can open towards people who move towards honesty, even when it's hard. People who take responsibility, even partially, for the harm they cause. People who show movement, yes, even slow movement, towards repair. The gate can stay closed for now, maybe even for a long time, but it stays closed towards patterns of consistent harm with no accountability. Not towards people as permanent verdicts, but towards patterns. And you hold the key. Not the loudest voice in the room, not whoever's applying the most pressure. You. And this is where we need to be careful, because this is where boundaries become weapons. When "this is my boundary" quietly becomes, "if you don't do this, you can't be a part of my life." It's not a boundary anymore. That's actually an ultimatum. And truthfully, most of the people in your life don't deserve a verdict. They deserve a gate with a key, held by somebody with enough wisdom to know when it should be opened and when it should be closed. I learned this the hard way. I had a foster daughter. She was part of our family for almost 3 years. When the placement fell apart, our family closed the gate completely. No calls, no texts, no door left open. We told ourselves this was necessary, that sometimes you have to make hard choices to protect what's inside the garden walls. But what we actually did was exile someone who just needed a garden to belong to. It took 8 years before that gate opened up again. And those are 8 years that I will never get back. If I could do it over, I wouldn't have closed the gate. I certainly wouldn't have locked it. It would have been limited access, but it would have been "not right now" instead of "not ever." There is a difference between a closed gate and a demolished one. And that difference matters more than I understood at the time. She is back in my life now, and I am grateful for that. But I do carry those 8 years. That decision, closing that gate, losing all of those years, it became the first bitter root in my life. And that root needed tending to. And that bitter root I mentioned is why we have the gardener. That bitter root did not stay contained. In fact, it spread and became something that I didn't even recognize, and it affected everything around me. There was a coldness growing inside of me that I didn't even know I was carrying. I told myself that I was protecting my family, and in some ways I was. We were all rebuilding after something very hard, and everyone needed some stability. And the truth is that caring for the people that were still inside my garden walls was necessary and was real. But while I was focused entirely outward on everyone else's healing, on everyone else's needs. I stopped tending to my own interior, and that bitter root, it grew. Slowly, quietly. It grew into something that I didn't even recognize until it was far too late. And that is how bitterness works. It doesn't announce itself. It just grows in the places that you stop tending to. Now, I want to be careful in how I frame this because I still do go to therapy, and it's been an essential part of my rebuild. But somewhere in the broader cultural conversation, the goal started to sound like this: do the work, become a fully self-actualized individual, and then maybe, just maybe, show up for other people from that place of health. Esther Perel has argued that this hyper-individualistic model of self-care has quietly hollowed out our capacity for genuine independence. That we've confused self-protection with self-development. The best relationships that I've witnessed, friendships, marriages, partnerships, co-workers, siblings, they're not two perfectly healthy individuals bringing their best selves to the table. They're two people choosing each other, tending toward one another, even when they're not at their best. Mutual, interdependent, not individual optimization. Now, of course, the garden isn't just for you. What you grow inside is also to be given away to others. You tend to it so that when you do open those gates, what comes out of you is worth receiving. So let's get to something concrete and practical. Three questions, and they are worth writing down. Question 1, what am I currently tending to that I didn't choose? Meaning, what's growing in your garden right now that you never planted? Someone else's anxieties that you absorbed as your own? A narrative that someone else handed you that you've been watering ever since? Question 2, what am I not tending that I actually want to grow? Meaning, what have you let go dormant because you ran out of space? Or what part of your interior life has gone untouched because you were too busy managing everyone else's? And question 3, what's one thing I can stop watering this week? I'm not asking you to have a confrontation, not even a hard conversation. Just think of one thing that you've been feeding that doesn't belong in your garden. This week, stop watering it. Now, I'm not sitting here today as someone who's figured this out. Some of my edges, some of my boundaries, I've only had for a few months. But I can already tell the difference between those days when I'm tending to my own garden and those days when I'm just trying to keep everything else out. That difference is real, and it's worth the work. Boundaries aren't meant to keep everyone else out. They exist to define what you're responsible for. This wall exists so that things can grow inside of it. The gate exists so that you can choose who gets in with discernment and not fear. And the gardener has work to do, rain or shine, regardless of threats or pests. Brené Brown has written that boundaries are actually the prerequisite for genuine compassion, not the enemy of it. The people who can't say no eventually can't say yes with their whole heart either. I told you earlier about the bitterness that grew in my untended garden, about the coldness that crept in. And eventually it led to burnout. I was separated from my kids for months. And I'll never forget the first conversation that I had with my daughter. She said, "It wasn't what happened that caused the break. It was everything that led up to it. I thought you were so mad at me," she said. "I thought you hated me." I wasn't mad at her. I certainly didn't hate her. But what she felt was very real. That coldness, that bitterness, that burnout, it had taken root years before everything fell apart. She felt it, and she interpreted it in the only way a child can. She felt it was her fault. That's the cost of an untended garden. It doesn't just affect you, it affects all of the people inside your walls. So tend to it. Not perfectly, not all at once, but honestly. Know what's yours to cultivate. Hold the keys to your own gate. And stop watering things that were never meant to grow within you. And then, let what actually belongs in there, your history, your people, your hard-won ground, let that take root. This straight line is not a weapon. It's not armor. It's not a defense mechanism. It's just the edge of something worth building. Researchers who study post-traumatic growth, the actual science of how people rebuild after trauma, have found something worth taking note of. People who recover well aren't the ones who cut everything off and start clean. They're the ones who get honest about what they're tending, what they're responsible for, what needs to go, and what needs to stay. Dr. Henry Cloud describes boundaries not as walls, but as property lines. You're not responsible for everything that happens outside of your line, but you are completely responsible for what happens inside of it. That reframe changes everything. Because once you stop trying to manage everything outside the wall, you finally have the energy to tend what's inside of it. The edge pieces don't complete the puzzle. They make everything else possible. Without them, nothing inside has a place to belong. With them, you know exactly where you are, and you can get to work. We started today with a word that's been overused, misused, and honestly, weaponized. Boundaries. And what I hope you're walking away with today is something simpler, and I think truer, than what most of us were taught. The wall isn't the point. The gate isn't the point. The gardener is the point. The boundary exists so that you know what's yours to tend, what to water, what to grow. That's the work, and it's quieter and more personal than any conversation that you could have with someone else about where your limits are. And personally, I think this view of boundaries is much healthier. Thanks for watching. If this episode found you at the right moment, I'd be grateful if you shared it with someone who's rebuilding. And in the comments, tell me, what's one thing you've been watering that doesn't belong in your garden? One word is fine. I'll respond to as many as I can. Oh, and one more thing. If you're in crisis right now, please don't wait. Call or text 988 for the National Suicide Prevention Line, or text HOME to 741-741 for the crisis text line. These resources are here for you, and you don't have to do this alone. Until next time, let's keep rebuilding, piece by piece.